Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And if you've been online over the last 24 hours, you might know that, sadly, it's been a rough 24 hours at Microsoft as they've scaled their operations back by laying off thousands of employees. This is something that you never want to hear. And first off, before we do anything today, I want to be very clear about this. This is a subject that involves real people. We often focus on consoles and gaming on this channel, but this does go beyond that. It's not just your typical subject, I'll say. Real people are involved in which it's affected their real life. So before we talk about any of this today, I just want to go ahead and say my heart goes out to all those impacted, and I wish those out there who lost their job the absolute best going forward. I hope they, or you if you're listening, I hope you bounce back quickly. So my absolute best wishes to all involved. However, this has affected a lot of teams within Microsoft, including, of course, Xbox's own internal studios, which is what we're going to talk about today. One of the immediate repercussions of these layoffs have been a growing concern with one of Xbox's biggest franchises. So we're going to get into all that today, why all this is happening, and also what Microsoft may need to consider going forward. With all that said, though, let's just go ahead and jump right into our first topic of the day, once again being about Ubisoft and their troubling situation. We know by this point, there's been some legitimate questions about their long-term future. They've been canceling games, they've reduced their cost by $215 million, and Skull and Bones is, well, pretty much as the title says, all bones, no meat. However, Ubisoft is currently receiving a lot of criticism internally after seemingly placing the ownership of their future success on their employees. Last week, after an emergency meeting, they reportedly sent a company email out to their employees noting that, quote-unquote, the ball is in their court, to more or less bring Ubisoft back to their former success. Now, this email has not been well regarded, as it almost seems like they're kind of shifting blame over to their employees rather than, looking at their own internal decision-making from the top, their leadership or lack thereof. Well, during an internal Q&A with their employees, they're apparently receiving major pushback over this email. In fact, one such response pretty much summed up a lot of what's wrong with modern-day Ubisoft. This employee asked, "Why are we chasing trends instead of setting them?" And that, my friend, is a great question that we've actually talked about on this channel time and time again. See, the thing is, over the last 6 months, if you look at this, Ubisoft has canceled 7 different games. And speaking of trends, the trend here is that most of those games appear to be what I like to call mythical cash cows. Your so-called free-to-play live service games built primarily to bring in an influx of cash over an extended period of time. Obviously, these games can be game changers for companies, no doubt about it. Take a look at Epic Games and Fortnite as an example. Huge success. But the problem with that is that you're much more likely to fail at making these type of games than it is to succeed. We've seen this over and over again. This is an extremely competitive market with a well-established user base, and it's hard to rip those players away from the games that they already know and love. Companies like Ubisoft, they seemingly want to ignore this. They want to imitate that success by creating their own version of what already exists. Even more so, Ubisoft's imitations so far have been completely unoriginal. As this employee says here, they're chasing trends, not setting them. You want to know why Rainbow Six Siege has had success? Because it's both fun and unique. It's not Call of Duty. It's not trying to be Call of Duty. It's not Battlefield. It's not trying to be Battlefield. It's its own thing. It's different. And again, it's also fun. Look at something like Sea of Thieves. Again, fun and unique. You can have success with live service games, but again, imitations are only flattery at the end of the day, and I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to grab fans and bring them over. It is what it is, I guess, but hopefully Ubisoft listens to their employees here because it seems like they know what's happening here. Now, we also got some PlayStation news, or really how they're expanding beyond PlayStation consoles. Sony right now is heavily expanding PlayStation's reach in 3 key ways. We'll go over each one by one here, the first of which is by making movies and TV series based on their popular game IP, such as The Last of Us HBO show. I remain very adamant that episode 1 was absolutely phenomenal, and most people do seem to kind of agree with that. Outside of just opinions, though, we now have some hard data revealing that Episode 1 was HBO's second biggest premiere since 2010, with a massive 4.7 million views. This sits only behind the Game of Thrones spin-off series, House of Dragons, and we all know just how big that franchise is. That is HBO's most recognizable series. So just absolutely incredible numbers here by The Last of Us, and I think it just kind of shows you what type of reach gaming IP can have when adapted properly. That always kind of seems to be the issue, as Hollywood often diverges from the original vision far too much. The Last of Us, though, was for the most part faithful with some minor changes, and you can also see that it was produced with just top-tier quality in mind. So honestly, good news for both Sony and gamers alike here. Hopefully we can see more game adaptations with similar quality in the future, and if so, these game franchises will be even more recognizable to the mass market. That is one of the major benefits of expanding outside of just video games after all. Look at something like Tomb Raider as an example. Lara Croft is an icon, not just because of gaming, but also because of Angelina Jolie and the old Tomb Raider movie. One other way Sony is expanding, though, and this is a new initiative for them that we'll likely see much more of in the coming years, and that's mobile gaming. Now, we already knew about their new mobile PlayStation division and everything, but now we are seeing one of their first games being Ultimate Sackboy. This is a running platformer that they just announced, and as you can see, it's pretty much your typical mobile game that will release on iOS and Android devices on February 21st. It's not really too much different than what we're used to seeing when it comes to mobile-style running platformers. Again, though, I mean, this is another opportunity for Sony to just kind of expand their reach, and hey, I mean, I'm all for Little Big Planet being more recognizable, as I personally do like the franchise myself. Crossing my fingers for maybe another PlayStation 5 game in the future. Of course, though, the other thing that Sony is doing here, and we're much more privy to this, is their continued commitment to porting PlayStation games over to PC. They've been doing this for a few years now, so it's not really a surprise by this point. They figured it out. This is easy money for them to make. Though their next PC port is actually one of their first former PlayStation 5 exclusives, being Returnal. So we're now moving out of the idea of them only porting PlayStation 4 games. From this point forward, there's nothing off the table. There's absolutely an opportunity for PlayStation to port more PlayStation 5 games, Returnal really being one of the first. Returnal, though, has now gotten its official release date. It is set for a February 15th release, and this will include several PC features such as screen optimization like DLSS or AMD FSR. It will also include ray trace shadows and reflections. It does have Dolby Atmos support and even ultra-wide support. Oh, by the way, being a first-party PlayStation game, yes, it also includes DualSense compatibility if you do have a PlayStation 5 controller on hand. Nonetheless, though, I mean, Returnal, this is a good game that I feel is often just a little bit overlooked. It's not as popular as, you know, a God of War or Uncharted, but that's also one of the reasons that this is an interesting PC release. It has a second opportunity to have success on a different platform. Again, though, it will be releasing on PC February 15th. All right, so let's go and get into this Microsoft situation, though, as they unfortunately laid off 10,000 employees, which makes up about 5% of their workforce. More on that here in just a second. But yes, this does include Xbox Game Studios, which is why we're talking about it today. First, though, let's just kind of talk about why this is happening. While Microsoft is certainly garnering a lot of attention, I mean, this is a very unfortunate situation. This isn't necessarily exclusive to Microsoft. We focus on them more because their position in the game industry, but it seems like this is something that's affecting multiple big tech companies right now. As an example, Amazon is also laying off 18,000 people as well, and there appears to be a correlation between the two. From what I've gathered, the reason for this is because in 2020, when the pandemic started, these companies ramped up their workforce quite dramatically to fit the times. A lot more people were working from home than ever before. Buying habits changed quite a bit during this time. And these companies, they went on major, and I mean major hiring sprees. I'm going to post a graph here to kind of better show you what I'm talking about. And you can see that here. In 2019, Microsoft had 144,000 employees. But then over the next 3 years, they ballooned all the way up to 221,000 employees. Now that we're exiting the pandemic years, though, and things have become financially more difficult, it appears that these companies are scaling back once again, but still remain bigger than what they've been historically. Talking about Amazon again, they appear to have done something similar, where they went from 798,000 employees in 2019 all the way to a massive 1.6 million in 2021, and now they're laying off, as I just said a moment ago, 18,000 employees. Either way, though, I mean, this is a bad look for both of these companies. Obviously, nobody wants to hear about people losing their jobs. It's an awful situation. And I mean, when it comes to Microsoft, I think it looks even worse for them, as they're also attempting to acquire Activision Blizzard for nearly $70 billion. So meanwhile, with them spending $70 billion, they're also axing a lot of their current employees. So it's just not a good look for Microsoft at all. There's no way around that, especially with the timing of everything. Now, as for the Xbox Game Studios that was impacted, it has been reported that several of their studios, including Bethesda and the Coalition, was also hit with layoffs. It appears that most weren't hit majorly, except for one being 343 Industries, the studio behind Halo Infinite. It's been reported that about 60 employees were let go, mostly from the single-player campaign, and even Joseph Staten, he moved back over to Xbox Game Studios Publishing. So all of this is a very peculiar decision. Halo Infinite single player was pretty much universally praised upon launch. I feel like people often kind of let their minds become shrouded, based off of what they hear on the internet and things like that, but don't let Halo Infinite's recent criticism fool you. Halo Infinite in its entirety was heavily praised when it first launched, especially its single-player campaign, which remains great to this day. You have to remember that this game won the Player's Voice Award in 2021. That's how much people liked it. The problem with Halo Infinite, though, that came much later, and that's not necessarily with the game itself, but rather that's with 343's struggles to give it consistent new content for its multiplayer, or to deliver on its promises like local co-op. That's the issue. Not the game, not its gameplay or its story. It just needs more consistent content. So seeing 343 get hit the hardest with layoffs while they're already struggling to get content out the door, you can easily see how that can be concerning for some out there. I've also seen fans concerned about the future of Halo's single player. Whether we'll see single player DLC going forward is kind of a legitimate question when you look at the layoffs here, or whether we'll have to wait for the next complete installment. Now, ultimately though, I think Halo will be fine in the long run. 343 still has a large workforce of, I believe, more than 300 employees, if I'm correct. They also have a lot of support, like Certain Affinity, as an example, which is reportedly working on the Battle Royale mode. So I think Halo as a franchise will be fine in the long run. But these layoffs, they did also shed some light on a very real issue that we've previously heard about before. There are some disgruntled former employees criticizing Microsoft over what's happening right now, and here's one of the more telling responses. This is coming from Patrick Wren, which said, "The layoffs at 343 shouldn't have happened, and Halo Infinite should be in a better state. The reason for both of those things is incompetent leadership up top during Halo Infinite development, causing massive stress on those working hard to make Halo the best it can be." Now, it seems like a big part of the incompetency that he's referring to here is Microsoft's reliance on contract work. This might work in different fields, but when it comes to gaming, development cycles can go 4 years plus. So the problem, and we've talked about this with Fable as well, these contractors come in to work on something like Halo Infinite, which uses its own engine. So these contractors, they have to learn a new engine on the job, and then when their contract is up, they leave the company. So on to the next contractor, and it's just kind of this revolving door. What Microsoft should probably do is either use a more universal engine like Unreal Engine, or hire these people full-time and give the company more consistency. I think that's one thing that Microsoft needs to for sure do better going forward. Nonetheless, though, anytime people lose their jobs, it's a sad situation, and again, I do wish everybody out there the absolute best of luck going forward. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, would you be interested if Scalebound truly does return? Those rumors, once again, are ramping up in 2023, and as you can see here, yeah, there's still a lot of people out there that remains very hopeful that this does indeed turn out to be true. 51% of you said yes, 22% of you said maybe, but I remain cautious, and then 20% of you said no. So 73% of you all are at least somewhat interested in a Scalebound revival. And I am with you all on this one as well. I personally like Platinum Games. I believe in them as a studio. They just know how to make fun games, whether that be something like Nier Automata, which is absolutely amazing. You have Bayonetta, once again, excellent. They have Wonderful 101, Astral Chain, and the list kind of goes on and on. They just know how to make really fun games. And I think even when it comes to Scalebound, I think that it has potential. I think that it looks like it has some interesting ideas, and in fact, some of its ideas was incorporated into Bayonetta 3, which again, turned out to be an excellent game. The problem that I saw with Scalebound was more from the performance side of things. Its performance was just kind of all over the place. Now, I also do have some questions regarding its multiplayer aspect. I'm not sold on that part of the game, but again, I think that Scalebound definitely does have some potential. And I mean, here we are all of these years later, and you can still see there's a lot of fans that believes in this game to at least some extent. So yeah, I think it is definitely worth giving another try, though I do find it interesting that some of you in the comments, I mean, you all don't trust Platinum Games, and you actually want another studio to do it. I'd personally say just go and stick with Platinum Games. They're already on board for this, and yes, this game might have got canceled the first time around, but they have said that they've learned a lot since then, and they've proven time and time again they do know how to make good games, so I'd say go ahead and give them another shot. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.